And thank you to our panelists for agreeing to participate to help everyone kind of get their questions answered around virtual learning from both the academic lens and also the social emotional lens. Before we begin, can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone was standing. I saw all of those basketball shorts that these gentlemen are wearing, with their shirt and ties. Just joking. Thank you so much. We're going to now ask our IT director, Mr. Bonds, to start our presentation. All right. Everyone can hear me? Yes, thumbs up. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Please go to the next slide. So the purpose of our evening, we're here to answer some questions. We really want our community to understand how we as a district are equipped to support our students during our current circumstances. Some of the focus and some of the questions that we're going to be answering this evening are, what should a parent expect academically during our new virtual setting? We'll speak to kind of the philosophical approach that we're taking. We'll of course speak to screen time, as well as how important independent learning and experiential learning is. And most importantly, we all know that there's definitely a social and emotional impact of our current circumstances with the COVID-19 pandemic. So we'll talk a little bit about connection and collegiality, as well as reflection. Next slide, please. So happy to kind of give you some of the norms for this evening. We will have a moderator, our new principal of Columbia High School, Frank Sanchez, who will be our moderator, and he will capture your questions from the Q&A section of our WebEx this evening. He's going to try and bucket those questions so that similar questions are asked, and he will ask which of our panelists would like to respond to those individual questions, and our panelists will all have their hands up, eager to give a response and maybe even give multiple responses. And so our participants, of course, starting with myself, Dr. Taylor, I'm your superintendent of schools. We have Dr. Alegria, our assistant superintendent of special services. We have Ann Botner, our director of curriculum and instruction. We have Fallon Balasson, our director of school counseling. Karen Weiland, our head social worker, who's also our director of the Parenting Center. We have many of our academic supervisors, including Kim Bean, Dr. Ramon Robles, Jamil Masuhuddin, Dr. Jane Bean Folks, and of course, Chris Preston. Next slide, please. I will now shift to Ann Botner. However, before I do, I want to acknowledge that some of our board members are also in the audience. I can see that we have our board president, Anne Marie Manning, as well as board member Aaron Siders, and probably more that are coming. Thank you so much for coming to participate. Anne?
Good evening, everyone. Hi. I'm so glad that you are all here to hear about the work that we've done and what we've prepared for our students for the next, hopefully, just a few months. So our philosophical approach is the flipped classroom. And the flipped classroom, the basic idea of it is that at home during after school hours, students might get some information. They may get a video, they may get some reading that's assigned to them that talks about the next day's lesson. It's almost like a pre-teach and getting students used to and start hearing vocabulary that might be used in that next lesson the next day. It could come in any form. Like I said, it could be videos, it could be reading. All of this work would be done independently at home out of school hours. So that would be like their homework. And then they would take that information and use it and apply it to some of the things that they're doing the next day. So it really takes away from that major long lecture time that we all remember having when we were kids, where the teacher would stand in front of the classroom and talk all day, and we would sit there and take notes after notes after notes. The idea of it is to take away some of that lecture time and have the students learn about the concept the night before. And then it'll allow them also to work in small groups the next day. It'll allow for deeper learning, interactive discussions. So it won't be that everyone is sitting and listening to the teacher all day, because we know that that is not the best practice and is developmentally inappropriate for many of our students. Okay, next slide. So one of the questions I've heard many times through the last few weeks and over the summer is, how much screen time will my child be expected to have? And in all honesty, we know that kids being in front of the screen for long periods of time is developmentally inappropriate. So it will vary based on grade, on age, on student. It can vary based on the needs of a particular student. So for instance, our kindergartners, our 5-year-olds, some even are 4 coming into kindergarten, they won't necessarily be on as long as even maybe a 2nd grader or a 3rd grader, and definitely not like a high school student. We have asked our teachers to plan in a number of movement breaks throughout their day so that students will not be sitting in front of the computer all day long. Next slide. So one of the things I wanted to show you, and it was in our handbook, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the possible lesson structures so that you have a sense of when something will be presented live, and more of when students will be independent and not necessarily sitting in front of the computer. We have 3 different examples or samples of what a lesson could look like. And, you know, we don't want to necessarily take to say that every teacher has to do everything the same exact way, because that wouldn't be best practices for teaching. And we want our kids to learn in different ways. So these samples will show you how teachers can structure a lesson that shows different ways of presenting information and having our students kind of grapple maybe over a question. So a typical one would be 10 to 15 minutes would be a mini lesson. And that is where they would present any new learning that a teacher or a student would have. It would be focusing right on the objective of the lesson. It will be reviewing any of the concepts from the flipped classroom homework from the night before. If they saw a video on a new concept, the teacher will definitely go over it and review it with them. This will be whole class, and it will be live. So anything that's new that we really want to make sure that our students are understanding, we're making sure that it is live and that they have the opportunities to hear the teacher explain new learning. Then after that, for 20 to 30 minutes, students could be engaged in independent or investigative work. They might be working on an assignment by themselves. They could be practicing something new. We know that the best way for students to learn is to keep practicing and practicing and practicing skills that they learn. So this independent time actually is so incredibly important for students to be trying out all their new learning. They could also be working in a group, and we have the ability to make small groups where our students could be working with one another. And they could also be in a small group being led by teachers, and that would be the live portion. So during that 20 to 30 minutes, it could be away from the screen, working independently. It could be working with another group of students, or they could be in a small group with a teacher who's leading a 10 or 10-minute lesson review of something, a new concept, or pushing them forward in an area that they're very strong in. These individual little areas allows us to differentiate and give our students exactly what they need. So that's probably the biggest chunk of our lessons, is that 20 to 30-minute period where kids could be really working on these new concepts. And then at the end of a lesson, we always make sure that we close a lesson and we review the key learning. And it's usually whole class, or it will be whole class, and it's also presented live to make sure that our students really understand that the students really understand what was being taught. So this is a typical lesson, and the samples we're giving you is what we would be actually doing in a live classroom face-to-face. We break down our lessons this way, where we are not standing in front of them and lecturing all day long. So this is really very, very close to what they would have if they were sitting in their classroom. Our teachers don't, stand up in front of the class and teach for the whole period. Okay, next slide for sample 2. So one thing that a teacher may do is put a question up. They might post a question on Canvas, and it might be something that that was based off of the homework from the night before, or the video that they saw, or the reading that they did. And it might be an investigative question. And we might have our students take 5 to 10 minutes to kind of grapple with that question and see if they can try to figure out different options and different ways to answer that question. And then from the next 10 to 15 minutes might be the mini lesson, where they're presenting the new information and reviewing more from the homework. That again, it'll be whole class and it'll be live. Then the 20 to 30 minutes, they can be in small groups working with the teacher, or in small groups with just their peers, or individual on something. And most of the time, they will probably be away from a screen and working on their own. And then finally, at the end, again, they will close a lesson, and that would be presented live by the teacher. Next slide. And the third sample we have is, we might start off a lesson where kids are starting off working independently, working off of something that they hadn't finished the day before, and the teacher will say, you know what, I want you to go work in your small groups, or I want you to work independently on this. I need you to read the next 2 chapters and take notes on this. I need you to, while you're reading these next 2 chapters, please study who the character is and how the character is changing. So they could have this independent work to do. They go off on their own and do it. And then after that time, they will come together and they will do a mini lesson, and you'll hear there's all these concepts or pieces of the lesson are the same. They're just moved in different ways. So then you'll have your mini lesson and the closing of the lesson. So, the components of a lesson pretty much stay the same, but the way it's organized is different. But please know that the expectation is that during the mini lesson and the closing, that will be live instruction from the teacher. The independent work area, they could be live with the teacher, they might not be. And chances are, if your child was live in one day, they might not be live in language arts again the next day. We have to rotate that, and teachers plan that out specifically for the groups that they're working on. Okay, next. And then this was I kind of explained this part about independent work and experiential work. But it's really about, students practicing what they work, doing some reading on their own, maybe they're researching a topic for a paper that they're writing. They might be working with a group on a group assignment. And all the small group, again, we as teachers, we really work hard to differentiate our small groups. And our students could be working with a small group who needs to have an explanation on, once again, on maybe, I'm trying to think of a place value. So maybe a small group just needs a quick review again. So the teacher will grab those groups of kids, review who needs it, and then send them on their way to practice again. And those are the main things that our kids will be doing. Next.
So good evening. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about social emotional concerns and supports during virtual learning. As we all know, good mental health is critical to children's academic success and progress. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the work that our counselors have been doing, our social work interns, and our social workers, our district social workers as well, to really plan for welcoming our students back, albeit virtually, but still welcoming our students back into a new school year. So we know social emotional learning will be critical to re-engaging our students, supporting adults who are working with our students and families, building relationships, and creating a foundation for academic learning. So with that being said, some of our areas of focus will center around coping with anxiety, students to feel good about themselves, dealing with any behavioral concerns that may arise, crisis intervention, referrals for outside services, assisting students with managing their stress, their feelings, anger, worry, etc. Also dealing with many of the challenges and changes that COVID-19 has brought to schools and also homes. Our families and our children have been, some of them personally impacted, and we want to make sure that we're wrapping our arms around them and fully supporting them when it comes to mental health and counseling and support, social emotional. And also working out friendship problems. We realize that it has been difficult with social distancing to maintain some of those friendships and some of that closeness that our students are used to. So we want to make sure that we're providing supports around that for them as well. And also dealing with peer pressure and bullying will be some areas that our guidance counselors and also our social workers and interns will be able to support families with. Next slide, please. So in terms of our elementary school social work and counseling program, we really are going to be trying, again, re-engaging our students and supporting our adults and families to work with students. So in terms of student supports, we're going to be offering social work and counselor-led class meetings, which will include some restorative circles to help students process all of the changes and the changes related to the pandemic. We really want to make sure that we're doing this infusion of supports on a holistic level in a holistic way. And so we'll be really offering some infusion of counseling supports within the classroom as much as we can. We also will be creating and have created a voluntary online buddy and mentor program to link our students up, some of our kindergartners with fifth grade students, high school students, seniors with freshmen, and really just trying to link up our students so that they have a peer support and a buddy support. And we're going to be working through that virtually as well to provide that support. One thing we noticed in the spring was executive functioning was an area that some of our students struggled with. And we want to make sure that we're being proactive with offering those supports. And so executive functioning would mean understanding, an example would be understanding what assignments are due for the day, planning out their day, planning out their week, and really supporting students around what their responsibilities and roles are. So we're going to be making sure that we're providing additional student supports in terms of executive functioning. Also, as we always do, provide individual and group counseling for students. This would be for students who have an IEP and for students who do not have an IEP. We want to make sure that if students need our help, we're there to support them. And so we absolutely will continue with individual and group counseling virtually for all students in need. Also, we're going to be offering some virtual student forums so that they can kind of process and also discuss some of the events that are going on. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. In terms of family supports, we're really excited this year to offer a call line for families and also staff members and students to call in. This call line will be staffed by our social work interns, and they will return the call within 24 hours on school days, really to provide some additional resources to families, to students, to staff members who may be in need and just need some brief counseling that can be provided over the phone, and also referrals and reference, and also resources to identify additional resources as needed. We have a full dynamic speaker series lineup for our parent workshops, and so we will discuss that as well tonight, just so that everybody is aware. We have a full lineup of parent workshops to provide additional resources and support for families. And we also have a district mental health page that includes tons of resources for families, for students, even other community members to identify in case of need. In terms of staff supports, we're working to provide scripts for teachers to use in terms of welcome back. If school were to reopen, we're going to be working on that as well. And also providing scripts and suggested answers for difficult questions that students might ask during the pandemic. As we know, our teachers may not be mental health experts, so we want to make sure that we're providing them with the tools necessary so that they can assist our students as necessary. Next slide, Keith. For our secondary counseling, we're really focused on removing barriers to success and provide students with social emotional supports necessary so that they can get the most out of their school experience. So some ideas that we've been working on include guidance lessons, workshops, teachable Tuesdays. The guidance counseling program primarily is held by Fallon Balasone, who's our director of guidance, who works in conjunction with myself, and also Karen Weiland for social workers. And so many of these ideas are things that have been a joint idea and things that have been also already in play. Looking at some events, virtual events, parent guardian nights, financial aid nights, college, career, military, and gap year fairs, senior awards night, Cougar Connects, which would be the middle school peer counseling program, some responsive services in terms of crisis response. And again, we're going back to that small group and individual counseling that will continue to be provided for students in need. We also have some indirect services. So there would be referrals, consultations, and also collaboration, and just making sure that we're all working together to address any mental health needs district-wide. This also includes academic advising, scheduling, and college and career counseling as well. Keith. Next slide, please. So here's information on our SOMSD care line. If you call this phone number with the extension and leave a message, within 24 hours on school days, a school social work intern will reach out and offer a brief consultation or a referral to other services as needed. We included this information in our virtual guide that we've passed out, and also this information is on our website as well, so that we're able to attract as many community members and students and families as necessary. Next slide. And here is information on our Parenting Center and SOMSD PTAs. This is the speaker series that we have outlined, which really runs from preschool and early childhood all the way up. And so the first series is on September 15th. We're really excited. We have Dr. Kosa, who's going to be talking about how stress affects young children. We have Dr. Gant, who's going to be talking about academic support for remote learning. And then we have Nancy Kislin, who's going to be talking about emotional supports for students during this COVID emergency. And then we have Lauren Morello, who's going to be talking about social media during the pandemic, which is definitely a hot topic. And then we have Dr. Briscoe Smith, who's going to be talking about how to talk to your kids about race and racism. So for the next couple of months, we do have this series scheduled for our parents and families and students to access and really get some additional supports and ideas and resources that we're really excited to share with the community. Next.
Thank you, Dr. Alegria. Much appreciated. And thank you, Ms. Botner, as well. Just so we're very clear on our intent this evening, we know that Canvas is a very hot topic, both for our teachers as well as our families, and we're providing a lot of professional development and parental workshops on Canvas as well. Canvas is not a topic that we're going to tackle this evening. However, our IT director, Mr. Bonds, will be pushing out over the next couple of days a mini webinar that really focuses in on Canvas for our district and how to get started. We have budgeted a significant amount of funds for us to provide many more Canvas workshops We have advertised the first few, and we will use the response from those workshops to plan many more. I also want to acknowledge that we now also have board member Shannon Cuttle and board member Elizabeth Baker. Thank you so much for joining us. And our number of attendees has now reached 1,000. Awesome job to our community. Next slide, please. We are now moving into the question and answer portion of our evening. And for those who were not with us in the beginning, our moderator will be our new Columbia High School principal, Mr. Frank Sanchez. Mr. Sanchez will be bucketing the questions that are in our Q&A here on the side of our screens. And please know that we are recording this presentation, and it will be available on our website. And whatever questions that we don't get to this evening, we will answer and place on our website as an FAQ as well. I will now give the floor to Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I just muted myself. Yes, we can.
Sorry. Thank you. So actually, the first couple of questions had to do with logistics, and I'm happy that you were able to answer that. Parents also were wondering if we can post the PowerPoint somewhere centrally on our website once this is finished and recorded. So I'm sure we will do that. There are many questions, some about, for example, the flipped classroom, what that's going to look like. Many questions about the breakdown of the classes. And so let's actually focus on that first. We have questions all along the K-12 spectrum. So why don't we start, if someone can answer from the panel, for the early elementary students, the breakdown that we did offer was 50 minutes, but I think for elementary school, they're a little shorter. So what will that day look like? Would it just mean that those individual parts of the day are just shorter, or will there just be longer independent time for those students? Specifically, I think they want kindergarten and first grade, second grade.
I think it all depends on the class. You know, nothing is ever the same and consistent in the sense of who's sitting in front of you as a teacher. So if it's a new concept and we're seeing that a student might be struggling, or students are struggling in a certain area or in the mini lesson, our mini lesson might go a little bit longer. Or maybe they're picking it up so quick and we want to get them starting in independent practice right away, and we move into independent practice. So to give it an actual, that's why I put time ranges in there between 5 and 10 minutes or 10 and 15 minutes or whatever it might be, because really that flexibility does need to be for each teacher to understand what their students are understanding.
And I'll just chime in a little bit there as well, that we do know that, and as Ann presented earlier, screen time, it really has to be age appropriate, right? And what's age appropriate for kindergarten may not be for a first grader or vice versa. And our teachers are professionals. And so we understand that we don't want our teachers or our students to be robots, right? We're giving ranges, and we expect our teachers to use their professional instincts and the guidance from their administrators to be able to maneuver this, right? But also understanding that, just as an FYI, we do summer meetings, as you can imagine, with our full group of district administrators. And we gave breaks throughout that, because even as, for myself, 47-year-olds, we still have a limit on the amount of time that we can stare at this screen and be productive and it be helpful for us. I hope that that helps.
Thank you. Actually, and there was a lot of excitement, I think, positive feedback about the small groups that students will be able to go into. But there were several questions about that. Specifically, again, for the younger students, the question really was, who would facilitate? For example, if we could give a specific for a first grader, what would that look like for a student to go into a small group? How would the student do that? Would that be teacher created group, or would students have to find their own partner and pair?
No, really it would be teacher created. And I think it's in the beginning, it's going to be, it might just be that the teacher is working with a small group and the rest of the students are working independently. Maybe they're reading, they'll be given the assignment and the task to do before they can go off and work independently. Or they, so if they're reading a story and they're practicing following along with the words with their pointer finger, then they can do that off on their own. But I do not think, especially in the beginning of the year, that many of our real young ones would be facilitating their own small groups. It would be very difficult, I think.
And just to chime in again, sorry to ducktail, Anne, but I think this is our passion, right?
Yeah.
This is what we do every day. We don't want students sitting in whole groups all day long in virtually any session that we're having. We do breakout groups all the time, and that's one of the great things about the Canvas platform, that it allows teachers to pull students into small groups for either acceleration or maybe a little bit of remediation. It's all about differentiating our instruction so that we're able to serve students where they are.
There was another question that I could answer, at least for the high school and middle school parents as well. But there was a question about how would students know when to be live? Would the video automatically connect when the teacher is ready? Or would they have to leave it live all the time? Canvas, one of the nice things about Canvas is that it has a calendar feature. So a teacher can add an event to the calendar for the student to then click and go to the platform that they would be using for the live presentation. So that's how a student would be able to connect automatically. Again, that's for the older students. For the elementary school students, I believe they would have the same feature, especially when they have circle time or their morning meetings.
Mm-hmm.
If that's correct.
Yes, you're correct.
And if I may say something, we've been working with teachers this past 2 days. We've been creating icons on Canvas that are very simple and easy to find. They're on their homepage where the student will click and it will take them to a link that will directly take them to a Google Meet. So, and the teachers are sending out announcements. We'll be sending out announcements saying, this is how we're going to meet. This is the time we're going to meet. So we've been working hard with teachers to make it very simple and easy for students to find that link and that place where to go and have a live meeting.
And that
Excellent.
also goes back, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Sanchez. That also goes back to what we said earlier about the webinar that we're going to be pushing out in the next couple of days. Just, a really brief how it works for us, how to find the links that Mr. Bonds will be sending out. And by the way, Mr. Sanchez is not being shy. He's having some technical issues over there with his camera, but he has his shirt tie and everything on. He's ready for us, but unfortunately we can't see him. But for our Columbia High School parents, I know you've seen him many times in the videos that he's put out for us.
Thank you. So there's actually a couple of questions about again, as we move from the breakdown of what a day looks like, and then some more conversations about flipped classroom, and some questions about from working parents. But I just want to get back to the schedule here. And there was just a question about, for, again, early students, let's say kindergarten, first grade, second grade, how would they be able to navigate the 2 to 3 o'clock or the 2:05 to the 3:45 time period, which I believe is the independent time? I don't have that in front of me, Dr. Botner, but if you can perhaps provide some clarity for the later part of the day for the early grade students.
Absolutely. So these will be times when teachers might set up an office hours and work with students. If they want to review something quickly, or even if a parent has a question about something, they can reach out to them during that time. They could take a small group and just review something. They could take a small group and do a reading lesson or something along that line, just to give extra supports if need be. And the teacher will reach out to the kids at that time and set up scheduled groupings.
And we're
Great.
also, we're also scheduling, intentional time with the guidance counselors and social workers that Dr. Alegria mentioned earlier. That'll be a time for some of that support for social emotional as well.
Perfect. So there are some questions about just the way we're going to try to balance our homework and then with the flipped classroom. So I just want to point out, I think the beauty of the flipped classroom before we get into any questions is that, as Dr. Botner mentioned, a child will be introduced to a topic, perhaps in the evening, with a video recording or a reading. And then the idea is when we kind of go over perhaps the most challenging aspect of that, which would be the next day in class, they would have the support of our great faculty and professionals to do that, as opposed to sometimes we introduce the concept in a class and then we ask our students to kind of work with it and apply it at night when really the teacher's not there. So that's the kind of strategy or the rationale for a flipped classroom. But parents are just wondering, how would the flipped classroom work if there will be limited assignments in the evening for grades 3 to 8 and perhaps very few outside work for students younger than grade 3?
So we do have a guideline for homework that we put on, and really understanding that, we are in different times right now. So we really thought carefully about the amount of homework that we wanted to assign. The teachers are skilled, and our supervisors and teachers have been working together to plan all of this work. And, everything is very similar and consistent with grade levels and subjects and classes. So homework has been assigned to meet those needs. So it might be a 5-minute video, or we might have you go read for a certain amount of time, or we might have you practice some of your math that you did, or read about, watch a video on math or science or social studies. We, at the younger grades, we truly believe that kids should be reading and playing. And they might play some math games. We might send some things that they can do after school or for homework that are math games that are fun to do, that you can play as a family, that might reinforce what they're, what is going on in the classroom.
And I would just add, can you guys hear me? Can I see a thumbs up if you can hear me? I would just add, we spoke about flipping the classroom in a lot of our high school planning meetings this week. And a couple things. One, we understand that just because a student watches a video, that does not mean they've mastered the topic. It just means that they viewed the video, right? So there's never going to be an expectation where it's like, watch this video and then we have a quiz on it tomorrow. It's going to be more like, watch this video and come tomorrow to class with questions. Another thing too, and I saw some people commenting about the amount of time the videos take, we're considering the amount of time that a student watches a video outside of live instruction to be homework time. So if a teacher gives a 10-minute video and 10 minutes of problems to try, that's 20 minutes of homework. And so we're making sure that teachers understand that, framework. It's not an expectation like, hey, watch many minutes of video, and that's going to count towards homework. So I hope that maybe allays some concerns about this process.
Thank you, Jamil. Another question has from a working parent, just asking, what are the expectations for our students, perhaps if they have to kind of juggle those different meetings when they're early elementary, if they have to go to a morning meeting and then try to go into a group meeting and in that example. Or in other words,
yeah.
Will it be set up efficiently so that an early elementary student can juggle that without, let's say, parental supervision?
I think that hello, this is Kim Bean. It's going to be, first of all, parents need to understand that there's going to be a gradual stage of students learning all of these different skills, right? At the beginning of the year, even if we were, in the school building, we spend a couple of weeks getting students used to our routines and procedures and expectations. And we're going to have to do that same thing virtually now. And part of that's going to be clicking links and so on. What we have designed, and we still don't know 100% how anything will work yet, right? Until we're with students. But what we have designed for the most part is that students will have one link all day for their whole class meeting, whether they're in morning meeting, whether they're in math, whether they're in science, they will always use that whole class link. And then there'll be a second link that's when they're being pulled into a small group. And the conversations that I've had with teachers over the last 2 days is that whole class link will always be running for the teacher so that he or she can, if they need to make an announcement to the whole group, if they need to call the whole group back together, that they can still do that. And they'll just turn their mic off when they're not talking to the whole group. And then they'll work with a small group. And then when it's time, they'll send those students back to the whole class and they'll call another small group of students. But from the student side of it, all they ever see is 2 links. The one they click on in the morning and leave on basically all day. And then the other one that they're going to use when the teacher's pulling them in a small group, no matter what the subject is.
Thank you, Ms. Bean. That's great. I think that answers a lot of questions, actually, about the links and how we can have parents and our students manage them. There's a suggestion from a parent, though, for K2, or at least kindergarten, first grade, if we can also think about providing whiteboards for students to perhaps not do as much typing as they connect with their teachers virtually. So I'd like to move over to our counseling program now and talk about our special services as well. We have many questions in that area. Just overall, first question, if a student was diagnosed with a learning challenge late in the spring, what is the process at this point for them receiving their IEP or 504 and making sure that our faculty is ready for that come September?
Thank you, Frank. So many evaluations were placed on hold during the springtime when we had the emergency school closure. However, we have evaluated many students over the summertime to get them their eligibility completed. So if there are any students who are in the middle of the process and they don't hear anything back from their case manager, that's the first person that they need to reach out to is the case manager. And then we will then move from there. But we have been working extremely hard to catch up on all of the outstanding evaluations that were not able to be done in the springtime. In-person evaluations were able to start July 6th. And so since that time, we've been really trying to get all the evaluations done. So once the evaluations are completed, we give them to the families to review for 10 days. And then we schedule an eligibility meeting to determine whether a student is going to be eligible or not. And if they are found to be eligible for special services, and at that point an IEP is created for the student. In terms of a 504 plan, that is done by the building administration. They do complete the 504 plans. With either plan, a 504 or an IEP, it does, in terms of teachers having knowledge of them, it does get uploaded into the Power School so that teachers are able to immediately view an IEP or a 504 for any student that's only within their classrooms. So that is the way that we provide that information to teachers and staff members who need that information.
Thank you. And I was going to say that's what we definitely do at the high school. Our teachers have access to all of that information through our student information system. So our faculty will be very flexible and ready come opening day.
Yes.
So a few questions come, and they are very appreciative of the focus on our social and emotional learning, but wondering how will we identify students who need additional support with, adjusting socially or with executive functioning. Will it be something that teachers will discover or something that parents should reach out first?
Sure. I'm going to let Karen Weiland take that call. I see your hand up, so I'll let you take that question. You're muted, Karen.
Okay, so sorry about that. Hi, everybody. At the elementary level, we have 2 streams. You will get an e-blast, but also up on our website, there's a link that goes to our flyer about our social work counseling program at the elementary school. And parents can reach out and interns will call you back and talk about the program. And if you want ongoing counseling services, group or individual, that's a student could use a little bit more support. They'd reach out to parents first, talk about it, and then reach out to an intern who would call the parents and set up counseling sessions. So, you know, so we're trying to make sure that we have a safety net for kids with a lot of, you know, different from perspectives. At the, Fallon, do you want to talk about the high school level?
Sure. At the high school, of course, we hope that the teachers would also reach out if they had any concerns, but that's one of the things that the counselors do. We constantly monitor our students, check not only their grades on PowerSchool, but check in with them. We regularly post Google check-in forms like we did all spring, just making sure everyone's doing okay, and then we reach out to any students with any concerns. And the counselors will also be proactively making contact with all of their students through small groups and individual meetings throughout the semester.
I also want to just point out for speaking with both of our middle school principals and as well talking with the assistant principals here at the high school, just on the secondary level, what we want to really do is talk about how or what are our reactions when a student struggles, and we definitely want to have specific interventions for these students. So what will a teacher do? What will, again, as Ms. Ballasone said, what will the counselor do? How can we reach out to parents to make sure they are aware of any students who are struggling? We definitely are focusing on flexibility these first few weeks. As we know, this is a very difficult transition for our students. So I want you to know that at the secondary level, as well as, of course, the elementary level, but when we have so many students in front of one teacher per se as they go from period to period, we know that the counselors and the administrators have a big responsibility in making sure that our students are to find those students who are struggling and to make sure that we connect them with the services they need. So we definitely appreciate that question. There's also some suggestions and questions about additional programming. They definitely appreciate the programs that were offered in the beginning of the presentation, but wondering if there's anything that we can do to help our teenagers and our pre-teenagers wrestle with anxiety, especially with the college application process, but also just being virtual and not being able to connect as well with friends.
I'll take that one. So we have a lot of things planned for the semester for the students. We are going to be having each counselor run a college application workshop within the first 2 or 3 weeks of school. So there will be multiple times and dates that students can sign up for a workshop. And we're going to start scheduling our individual senior college and career planning meetings beginning mid-September. So your student will receive information about how to schedule that meeting with their counselor. And we encourage parents and guardians to attend the meeting as well. And then we have our senior parent night, which is heavily focused on the college application process and career planning on Wednesday, September 23rd at 7:30. I'll be running that. So that's just some of the college and career planning events that we have scheduled right away, but we also have our student assistance counselors planning to run small support groups throughout the semester for our students. So anyone's welcome, anyone who just wants that connection, whether they're really struggling emotionally or just kind of want to see their peers in another way other than in the instructional classroom. So we'll have opportunities there for them to drop into regular Google Meet support groups as well. And the counselors will also be running small groups to meet their students, starting with Tuesday for the ninth graders, their first day. They're going to be able to meet their counselors in groups during that day. And we'll have other things planned like that throughout the semester.
Thank you. A question about virtual student counseling. Will the students have the same counselors and support that they received last year? Specifically, they're asking about work interns, and I would assume that perhaps those interns have moved on, but if there's a way we can answer that question.
Yeah, I think that's me. At the elementary level, every year we have, this year we have 17 joining us. We have found over the years that the good relationship and the good feelings developed over 1 year really does move on and enrich the next year. So we have all new interns that'll be meeting our students, and they're excited and ready to go. But they can stay with that intern over the course of the entire school year.
That's great. Thank you. So there are a couple questions, and I think this would be good for supervisors from secondary parents. Just wondering how we can cover the curriculum if we are, especially in this first marking period, if we're going virtual. So, for example, if in the high school a student is only able to go to a certain class 2 to 3 times a week, how comfortable should they be with the curriculum, and how can that be covered in this kind of truncated time?
Well, one thing we just have to recognize is the amount of minutes that an instruction is happening in a week in September is less than it was in a week in September last year. The amount of minutes that we're giving for homework in a week in September is less than a week in September than it was last year. And obviously time is something we can't create more of. And so, we have to understand that that's a capacity thing, and we want to be respectful of teachers and students' time. So, my recommendation, and when I've talked to the members of the STEM department, is go at a pace that is comfortable for you. You can't expect to be in the same place on November 18th this year than you were on November 18th last year. And we obviously will have conversations about ways that we can, increase and get better. But this, at least I'm speaking for my department, is not the time to hold ourselves to the exact same time commitments and coverage of curriculum as we did a year ago.
And I'll jump in as well. It's Dr. Bean, folks. I'm saying the same thing in ELA. Right now, it's more important that we establish the relationships and our work pace for the beginning of the year. We'll probably catch up as time goes on, but I think it's much more important, and I've been stressing, it's all about relationships. It's about how do we learn through distance learning at this point in time.
So, just to add a little bit more, in world languages in ESL, we've had similar conversations. We've met as supervisors, and we've tried to deliver the same message to all our teachers. We are going to be having meetings every week with our teachers, where we're going to look at our curriculum. We're going to make decisions as to how do we move forward, how do we make sure that we get to all the topics that we have to cover. What is it that we can do without, but what is essential? So these are conversations that we're going to have every week with our teachers to ensure that by the end of a school year, we have covered, if not possible, what we used to cover a previous year, most of the most important topics that we'll be covering.
Mr. Preston, did you want to answer?
I was just going to piggyback on what Dr. Bean folks said. The advantages that teachers and students had when we left in March was those relationships were already firmly established. And now we're starting in a different space completely in terms of how do we start those relationships now completely virtual. And that's going to take, a fair amount of time to do. And so for social studies as well, for the curriculum, in terms of just making sure that our students get up to speed in terms of a regular daily instructional experience, which I think will be emphasized in the minds of students for sure that, you know, this is school, this is on. And that's something that I think will be a difference in a positive direction than the spring. But we are just, you know, going to gauge in terms of how our students are doing over time in being in front of a virtual learning situation for a sustained period. So we will be having those conversations and continuing them through the year goes as well.
Thank you. I do want to also just jump on what Dr. Bean's folks said about relationships, and that's really the most important thing that we can focus on in the beginning of the school year, elementary, middle school, or high school. It's very important, especially as we consider our restorative practices. That's the foundation for us, is forming relationships with our students, and we really want to keep that in mind as we begin the school year. And that really deals with flexibility, which is the subject of our next question, and just some anxiety from parents about how much flexibility can we expect as parents, as working parents, with our students, especially our early education students, our kindergarten, first grade, second grade students. Would they be behind if they don't have as much, if a parent isn't there during the day as they are learning?
I would say we understand, right? We're in an unprecedented time right now, and one thing that we have received is feedback from our families, and we've done countless surveys and had countless conversations. That the one thing that I think our families were craving from their spring experience was a framework, right? That they wanted to know a consistent framework of what to expect as both students and also parents. And they wanted to know that if they chose to do some type of outside the box planning for their family, that they knew what our framework would be for scheduling. It's not that we're creating robots, it's that we want to have consistency across grade levels and across schools. I did see a question in the chat here in the Q&A that asked about, will a fourth grader in one school will they have similar experiences and assignments as a fourth grader in another school? And that's our goal. The majority of our summer was spent on that type of consistent planning. I see all of our supervisors ready to jump out of their seats to add on to that. Why don't we go to Ms. Bean to kind of give a little more on that?
First, I want to say that when parents are involved in their child's education, it's always fantastic, right? So I'm never going to say that it doesn't make a difference because I'm a parent. It makes a difference, of course, that I'm involved. So we want parents to be involved with their child. That doesn't mean you have to sit next to them all day. I mean, we can give them a little room to be independent and breathe, but so parent support is important. If for some reason the schedule as we have it does not work for a parent, like they're not available during the day, it is possible for us to, if we understand a specific situation, to set up some ways to work the schedule a little bit more around in an asynchronous way so that the parents can be more helpful to the child. So that is a possibility. It's not something we're planning to roll out immediately if there isn't a need for it. But if there is a need for it, we can make some adjustments and make that happen. What was the other piece of it? I don't remember what the other half of the question was. It was about how are we?
I think you answered that. I think we answered it. And just to kind of dovetail on to the piece about if I absolutely cannot be with my student, will they still be supported if they're with a babysitter or in a situation where they're at the YMCA? And for those who may not be aware, we are training the workers at the YMCA in the Canvas platform so that they can be helpful to students whose families choose that option. It is difficult, we must say, for us to move in an asynchronous way from the very beginning, because a lot of the live work that Ann Botner pointed out, that really can't be recorded and restarted, but there's a lot of asynchronous support. I think that's the piece that we've been trying to stress this evening, that there's so many things outside of lecture, right, that can help students learn. Dr. Bean, folks, I see you nodding. You want to add anything to that?
Absolutely. It doesn't always have to be in the lecture. For the answer in regards to consistency, particularly with K through 2, I've really tried to support the teachers with a template and with and also for students that have buttons. So there's not a lot of text. There's an image that the student can click on and then understand the work that they will need to do. So there's an icon like for a chart, if they need to look at a chart, or there's an icon for a video for them to find the video within the class. So we've tried to take into account that there may not be the parent, but maybe a caregiver that's right there beside the child that would help them to navigate. And it's consistent across all of K1 and 2. I've tried really hard to make that happen.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions from parents, if they could get or they can receive some tips, some recommendations to help their children throughout this process. Just wondering if there's someone asking if pods are the way to go. How can they support their child throughout this? One of the questions was how they could help if they have different teachers, but I think Dr. Taylor and the supervisors stressed that already continuity is one of our main goals. But other than that, what other recommendations can we have for parents?
Yeah, I see a lot of questions in the chat about looking into Canvas and, do I have to check Canvas every day to see what assignments my students have? You can, and similarly to Google Classroom, like those things will be viewable by parents, but I think a good just first place to start, and this is true every year since forever, just talking to your student about what they learned in school that day. That makes a world of difference, and that's a no technology kind of conversation. And I think just start there will really take the conversation where you need it to go, and make that a regular practice. I always tell parents to do that. I think that's a good place to start.
And I'd like to add, across the board, I think it's really important to talk about not only what materials, and on all of the Canvas sites, there are resources in ELA for materials that would be supportive of your child's learning, but also talking about a space in which to do your work on a daily basis is going to be really, really important. And lastly, for ELA, in terms of reading, go to the public library. Get a short stack of text on a weekly basis. Plan that as a weekly event for kids to be reading, because reading is the way that students are going to meet the standards, whether or not we get through a single lesson or not. That has been proven to be the one thing that we can do. So I can't stress it enough.
Thank you. Before we go into more of our technology questions, parents want to know what the first day of school will look like. If we can get an example of that in elementary school and in the secondary school. So what's the first day of school going to look like?
So can I just jump in for ELA, because I'm like so excited about this. So we
Sure.
really have been trying to say to teachers that on your first day of school, it's about getting to know your students. So I, as a teacher, I love reading aloud. I have a short stack of favorite reads that I love to read aloud. And whether I'm teaching elementary or am I teaching at the high school level, it's about bringing that community together. And then around that, it's about the icebreaker work, right? It's about getting to know who's in the class. It's getting to know the quiet voices. And then the ones that I'm going to know right away, I can depend on them for help with technology no matter what. And in some instances, my students might know a little bit more than I do, and that's okay. We're a community. And that's what the first day is going to be about. We'll have some mindfulness breaks in there so that we are getting to kind of find out how are we feeling and how the work is going. But that's what I imagine if I were a teacher. That's what we've been talking about as faculty these last couple of days. So that's whether or not you're in elementary or middle school or high school on day one?
I think it would also be, well, we'll continue in terms of just checking in with how they're doing. And we had talked about, the affective domain and what does it look like to establish classroom culture and relationships with students in a virtual setting. And just those actual explicit check-ins to see and give students the time and the space to know that they will have a place where they can just be free to just talk about how they're negotiating all of these new experiences for them. And so sharing that and communicating that's a value aspect for teachers and students will be done on the first day as well.
Can I say something about at the elementary? Every single day at the elementary will start with what we call morning meeting. And that's really where parents need to understand that that's how the day will start. So there will be a link, and all the children will go to that link, and the teacher will be facilitating a conversation among the students. So our very first interaction is just bringing the group together. And then, as Dr. Bean Folks said, really, it's not just the first couple, the first day or two. The first full week is really dedicated to building a classroom community, and in a much stronger, we always do that in a regular classroom. But the piece that we've had a lot of conversations with teachers about this year is we're now going to take students who haven't been part of a class in a while, right? They haven't maybe felt a part of things. And so we have to work extra hard to be excited to see our students each day, to greet them as if, oh, I'm so glad you're here. We've been waiting for you to get started, so that every child feels a purpose for being there and the importance of being there. And that's really what we're working on that first week. This idea that, we need each other to do our best, and it's important for us that you come each day and join us and join in the fun and all of that. So it's going to be a lot of activities that teachers have planned to do that.
I was just going to add that social workers will be meeting with every class in a restorative circle and really talking about all the changes, the massive changes, what it feels like, talking about our feelings, managing feelings. But what are the hard parts? What can we do about the hard parts? What parts do we actually like a little bit better? And becoming a community, supporting each other, and thinking about and processing everything that's happening. And we hope to do that periodically, and work with small groups to make sure that kids have a place to talk about and process their feelings about everything that's going on.
One of the key words that I would use to close that out, that we use in education many times, is rituals and routines, right? You want to really establish the rituals and routines of this environment. I'm sure that there'll be some students who don't have their cameras turned on, and the teacher will remind them that we all need to see each other. It's part of what we do. And also, I saw a couple things in the chat about HIB with bullying, and Dr. Alegria kind of touched on that. Establishing, how we respect one another, how we value one another. What have you been doing? I had an opportunity to speak with students throughout the summer, and they were excited to tell me how they have experienced this. This is a monumental time in their lives. No one will ever forget 2020. So we have to make sure that they have the opportunity to express that, right? And to talk to each other about what they have experienced if they haven't seen each other throughout the last 6 months. And also for those who are transitioning into a new school. That's an entirely different experience. They don't know the principal and the assistant principals, and they have different guidance folks to help out. And so there's a whole get to know the new rituals and routines of this new, not just this new platform, but our brand new school year.
Thank you. And there were certain questions about what the schedule will look like, and I just want to remind parents from Mrs. Bean's answer that for elementary school, the morning meeting is when our students will get their daily schedule of what actually they will be going on throughout the day. And on Friday, both at the elementary and the secondary school, students will get an overview of what will happen next week by their teachers. So parents and also students are kind of aware of what topics and content they will be seeing in the future. There were certain questions about the high school schedule and specifically why the high school schedule is on an every other day rotation, and I think that has the same answer with elementary school. We were just concerned about screen time. We just didn't believe that it made sense for our students as we transition from summer to the fall of going online from 8 to 2:30 every day with all 9 periods. So what we wanted to do instead is to have focus on 4 classes a day and actually make those classes a little longer than they would on a regular school day. So students will be going through their periods 1 through 4, then periods 5 through 9 for 55 minutes a day after our 2-week kind of soft opening. And we think that's a great way of getting the content. It will not be, again, as Jamil answered, the same as last year, but what they can do in those longer periods is get to actually deeper things. I know as a teacher, 40 minutes I found to be very short, and you would just get started with the opening mini lesson and then a discussion, and the next thing you know, the bell would ring. So this will allow teachers to really restructure their classes, be standards-based, and make sure that we can get as much content as we would during a regular school year that we possibly can. So that's why we went with this A-B schedule. Again, we're just concerned with screen time and having all 9 periods on one day. Also, another reason, and this is something that other people on the panel can answer, there were questions about when students can get that student support. And for us, having that block at the end of the day, we thought it was very important for our students to meet with their counselors, to meet with child study team members, definitely also continue our period 9 conferencing. So that's when, at least at the high school, we do expect to have a lot of our student support time, but parents also are just wondering in the elementary school, when will students be able to have that time, and will it be during the instructional time?
If we're talking about counseling time, really interns will speak with parents and teachers and come up with the best time. Usually it's not during instructional time, but we'll pick a time that really works best for families and teachers.
Great. So let's move on to some technology questions that we have. Parents are wondering, they're very appreciative of the Chromebook loaners that we have been passing out. Mr. Bonds and his team have been working on that for several weeks, and at the high school they started this week distributing Chromebooks. The question is, if there's a problem with the Chromebook, what can parents do? How do they reach out for assistance?
Good evening, everyone. The best approach to reach out for assistance with the Chromebooks is to use our info@somsd.k12.nja.us address. It's the same address that we use to collect Chromebook requests, and more often than not, we'll try to troubleshoot any of those requests remotely. In instances where the Chromebook needs to be replaced, we'll schedule a replacement swap time in which the parent can come in and swap the device out.
Thank you. Parents, there were many questions about Canvas, but I think we were able to answer those that Mr. Bonds will be sending out some support instructional videos in the next few days. So that is something that has been already answered. Another technology question really has a lot to do with screen time and wondering if there will be flexibility for students, for example, a kindergarten or first grader who may not be able to sit in front of the screen from 8 to 3:45. Will there be a possibility of submitting schoolwork but not being present at certain sessions? So that's a question for the early elementary school administrators.
So that's kind of a challenge that we are, investigating, because we do have a legal requirement for compulsory attendance. The district is held accountable for the attendance and reporting attendance of students accurately. So we are reviewing that because we have received a few requests from parents who have different circumstances and are asking if perhaps they could reach out to the teacher, turn in the assignments, etc., but the students might not be able to log in and check in and be marked present. So there are some technical pieces there that we need to get some advice on legally to make sure that we're not setting up our district to later be held accountable for mistakes. So we want to just make sure that that is correct. And when we have that information, we'll add it to our FAQ and share it with the community.
Thank you. This question has to do with assessments in using technology. How will teachers assess students on all levels, but as many of the questions came from elementary school parents?
I'll jump in on that. The answers we're going to use, it may change by the grade level of the child. Certainly at the early K1 and certainly at the beginning of second grade, we're not able to really give them any kind of written test under this circumstance, right? And so a lot of that assessment will happen when the teacher is pulling small groups in the conversations that the teacher and the student are having, as well as seeing the activities that we've asked them to do. In the case of math, that will have to do with manipulatives, and having them demonstrate and explain their understanding of things. When you get into the upper elementary grades, it's a little different. The children are a little bit more tech savvy, have a little bit more skill. We still cannot require a lot of typing from them. They're not going to give us a tremendous amount of output in that area. So we can construct either, if we had to do some sort of traditional assessment, we could do a multiple choice, which doesn't take a lot of writing from the student, but also we're able to build some interactive activities where we use virtual manipulatives in mathematics, and they have to construct something based on some parameters that we've given them. So they need to demonstrate their fluency in that way.
And I'll just jump in from the ELA side of the house in that we've really spent a lot of time researching, and we've partnered with Teachers College for assessments that can be done online. They've been modified from what we normally face-to-face, but we have been able to secure really simple assessments that will give us insights into student knowledge around reading and also around writing. So I'll be working with faculty on those tools and doing that work in the near future.
Thank you. Another technology question has to do with resources and materials. How much online and digital resources will students receive versus the traditional textbook, and how will textbooks be distributed?
So we are working, I'm working with the supervisors to come up with a list of materials that we will be sending home. And it will be probably within the first 2 weeks of school. I know somebody brought up the idea of the small whiteboards. We'll be sending those home. What a great way to just assess kids quickly. They write their answer on the board and hold it up in front of the camera. We really tried to think of the things that we use in school often to send home so that we can replicate as much as possible of what a school day would look like and what a lesson would look like. So you will be getting an email or a call from your principals. And in the next few weeks, we're hoping that by the end of the first 2 weeks, those 4-hour days, that we will have a plan and students will have these materials in hand. It will include textbooks. It will include any type of manipulatives that students might need. It will, anything that we can think of that we have in our classrooms that we can send home, we'll be sending home.
And I'll just jump in from the ELA side of the house in terms of I have been able, fortunately, to pull together a number of reading resources that you'll see once you're on Canvas. We've set up a resource page where you can actually click on, there's at least 8 different resources for every single grade level, and that students can actually, as I mentioned earlier, create a short stack online with one of those resources, whether it's EPIC or ReadWorks or Common Lit in the high school level, so that students have access to materials for reading. And again, we've partnered with both the town libraries. The librarians are really happy to help students locate materials, and they can give us multiple copies if a group of students would like to read the same text, as well as our school libraries. They've got a whole new rich reading resource that we can also support reading. So there's lots of reading online, and for students who need to have an audiobook as opposed to an ebook, we have that capability as well.
I just want to jump in and give a plug for Soma Shares. At all the lunch distribution sites, which is Seth Boyden and Columbia High School, we will also have tables of gently read books. So it's a big book exchange, and we literally have hundreds and hundreds of books to share with the children in our community. We're really excited about that. So that's another, yay, that's another resource.
I think it's fair to say that Dr. Bean folks likes books. Just one more addition to that. I saw in the chat on this same topic around how will will library be a part of students' schedules if we know that social distancing and mitigating may not allow students to come into the school's library. How will that be managed? And I want to give Ms. Botner a chance to talk a little bit about that.
So we do have, we've been talking about this actually a lot, like very recently, and trying to find the best way to manage all of this. We've talked about maybe having our libraries available once a week where we can drop off and pick up. That's a possibility. We haven't quite figured out any logistics at this point, but we do have plenty, as Dr. Bean Folks has said, we do have plenty of online resources that our students can go to read, and they are compatible with the Chromebooks. They can open them up and read them right on the Chromebooks. And we really are trying our best to think of ways to get real hard copies of books into our students' hands, which is our next plan. Libraries, the town libraries are open, and they are just eager for our students to come and get books. And I encourage you to do that as often as possible. Maybe make it a weekly trip that you do as a family. And then also, like Ms. Weiland said, we do have an enormous amount of books that were donated to our community. I think Eileen, our Achieve, who's head of Achieve, she's told me she has 90 bags in her basement of books that we are just looking to hand out, and we're going to work with them to make sure that we get these books out to our students. So there's a lot of plans we're still trying to pull together, but our goal is to definitely get these books into their hands.
Thank you. And this actually leads to another question, since library is a special in early elementary school. What will our specials look like for our students, whether it's elementary school or middle school? And that includes physical education as well as music.
I think Mr. Mano is on, and he might be able to give us a little bit about music and art. Are you there, Mr. Mano? Well, I can give a little bit of an insight. Our students, especially at all ages, but at our elementary levels, will have specials daily, just like they do in the school day. So they will, for the 4-hour days, they will last a half hour. Our teachers will be getting their classes just like our general education teachers or our home classes. and they will be doing different types of work with our students, modeling something for them to do. We will be sending home at all levels, really, some art supplies that they can use. We have ordered extra to make sure that our students can have them at home, and they will be walking them through lessons as they would if they were in school. In music, they will be, structuring with a mini lesson also, and having different types of group work and whole class. And PE, they might show a skill in yoga, and they might have a video of it up showing different techniques in yoga, and then having the kids practice it with them. So there will be live instruction from our specialists, and they're really excited to do this work and give our kids the opportunity to have a really well-rounded education, even virtually.
Can I chime in there? Just to be specific for some of our parents who have that concern, the schedule that we sent, especially for our elementary schools and also middle schools, but more so elementary, didn't carve out when the specials, quote unquote, specials or electives would occur, but they are embedded, but they differ from school to school because the master scheduling of each elementary school has to be customized based on the number of teachers and number of students and all those type of things. But it will be a part of the student's day, as it normally is when they are in our brick and mortar. I know we have a kind of a hard stop here at 8:30 to allow these fantastic educators to get ready for the work that we'll be doing tomorrow, again, focusing in. But for those who may have missed the beginning of this, it will be posted as a video to our website. And so I saw a few questions that were being asked that were answered in the beginning. And some really important ones were around screen time. Are we expecting kids to sit in front of a screen for 5, 6, 7 hours consecutively per day? And that is 100% not what we believe in as a district, not for our students and not for our adults. We don't believe it's healthy for anyone to be staring at a screen for hours and upon hours. But we do know that our students do need a connection to their teacher, a connection to their fellow student, right? Some of them, they need to see each other and still build those virtual relationships. So we believe that this will provide that, but we are very, very conscious of the screen time and the age appropriateness of it. So thank you to, again, Principal Sanchez from Columbia High School for moderating for us. And again, he's not hiding with his camera. He's having a malfunction. He's having a malfunction that he and Mr. Bonds together couldn't fix, and they're two of the smartest guys that I know. So I did see another comment around if I want to donate books, who do I bring them to? And I'm going to ask you to please email Ann Botner and maybe CC Dr. Bean folks, and we can give you some guidance on that. So again, thank you to our panelists, to Dr. Alegria, to Ann Botner, to again, Principal Sanchez, all of our supervisors, Jamil, whose name I messed up in the beginning. I'm sorry, Jamil. Thank you so much for giving of your evening. Thank you to our families who took part in this event. And this is not the last time that we're going to get together, right? We have a number of experiences already scheduled through our parenting center in partnership with our district. So again, thank you everyone, and have a fantastic evening.